said, I'm
feel.
not going out to dinner.
Since when is this been decided? What are we talking about here? She's right.
It's something we've discussed for a while now.
Don't be worried. There's no hostility. Nobody's angry here. You see, we're fine.
What is the reason?
Don't turn it into a tragedy. Don't, guys, please.
Okay, well, I wanted to open with another perspective on our return, because we were talking about recovery. And part of that, I think, does have to do with acknowledging that we're not getting a divorce in a vacuum. Here we have a couple who are announcing to some very close friends, we're ending our relationship, and we're really fine, thank you very much, okay? I'm wondering about that piece in terms of in recovery and making our own lives. How do we address the fact that we may have children and in-laws that are the grandparents of our children, and friends that we have in common? How do people often handle that?
Well, one needs to develop a new circle of friends very often, in addition to trying to keep as many of your old supportive friends as possible, because people have different reactions to a divorcing couple. You'll find that some people consider divorce to be somewhat contagious, yes, and so they'll start worrying about their own marriages, and they won't want to spend much time with you. Okay. So it's very important to develop a new circle of friends who can be supportive of you.
Okay. That's an interesting point, the contagion factor, the idea that, well, I mean, that particularly as women, I think we have often been taught to be competitive to one another. This idea that there aren't enough men to go around, and somehow now I've got this single woman loose in my friendship circle, and you know, I might begin to feel threatened, even if I'm not even aware of what that's about. And I've had a lot of women say to me, my girlfriends don't want to have me to dinner anymore. And also because it's awkward, particularly if that couple also liked the person you're divorcing. I mean, it's
that's a big adjustment too, and it's really difficult for the friends and for the couple. I mean, the couple's grieving that whole process of grieving their loss as a couple, whoever their partner is, and then they're grieving the relationship, the idea of being a couple.
Right.
You know, and that's difficult. I mean, all the things that people do as couples, they have a hard time adjusting to just being alone.
Okay. So that idea that the trappings that maybe did go with it, the different couples we spent time with, and maybe the children's ball games and things that we did that we may miss actually more than our actual significant other.
Yeah, because it's a transition. It's not just, a divorce is not just an event, it's a transition. Your life is going to be radically changed. Whether it's going to be better or it's going to be worse, it's going to be different.
Okay. Well, and part of that difference, I would guess, would also be the kind of choices we do have freedom to make. I know that economics do affect that people's economic status often changes with this kind of decision.
This is true, because two really can't live as cheaply as one, but two together can live more cheaply than each separately. So the first thing that one notices is that one has less money.
Okay. So in terms of developing new hobbies and places to go and things to do, maybe a time when we really need to do that, we may find ourselves with less financial resources. How do people in your group do that, in your rebuilding group?
Well, one way to do this is to have, the groups often have potlucks and socials, and this is a very good way of getting together with safe people and spending time with people.
Okay, what is a safe person?
What is a safe person? A safe person is someone who can support you in this process. At the very beginning stages, people aren't really ready to date. And it's probably not a good idea to date and get romantically involved at first, but you do need to socialize, because one of the big traps is loneliness. You've lost your companion. You've lost your built-in social activities.
Okay.
You know, so it's important to have new activities and people to do them with.
Well, I think there is that instinctive desire to want to find another person to spend time with, kind of fill that gap, you know, that I think does tend to get us into trouble.
Well, it's, you know, that sense of security again, and what they're familiar with, having another person in their lives. But there's also a push-pull dynamic in the sense of they're afraid to be close to somebody else. They're afraid to trust again. They're afraid to take that risk again. So they need, you know, companionship, and they'll make some level of risk, but then they'll back off or push away, you know, because they're afraid to go any further.
Okay, which to the other person who maybe has been out of a relationship for quite a while may be very confusing. Kind of like you're saying you want to get to know me, and then now you're avoiding my phone calls, and I don't understand. Yeah. So maybe it is, I think, kind for all concerned to maybe buy ourselves some time after that initial split.
I think on the safe person idea, the other part of that is that you find a person who can really listen, you know, that can really empathize and understand and not just try to fix it or, you know, be scared of your emotions.
Well, and that fixing is part of another friend reaction. One friend reaction is to avoid. Another friend reaction is let me fix you up with at least 6 other people, you know, because they don't want to see us in pain. So it's sort of that we'll just buy you a new puppy syndrome, you know, and we'll just get somebody else. And having to say to your friends, you know, that's really not what I want to do, thank you very much, recognizing they might be well-intentioned. But that can feel like an awful lot of pressure. Like the message is, if you're not part of a couple, there's something wrong with you. That kind of feeling people have expressed to me.
That's why it's so important to make friends who can share your experiences.
Yeah. When do you know you're ready to get on with your life? What are some feelings you might have?
I think probably when you stop obsessing about the relationship, the past relationship, and you start beginning to love yourself again, and you're starting to be able to trust.
Okay, that's an important one. We have a list of, now that I think about it, a list of graphics we can refer to about this very issue. Let's see, principles of recovery: honesty with yourself and others, forgiveness, mostly of yourself, establishing your needs versus your wants, maintaining your health, focusing on real issues, and a sense of structure. So in terms of honesty with self and others and forgiveness of self, what do you find that people are normally blaming themselves for as part of this process?
Well, the failure of the relationship.
Okay. That they should have known?
That they should have known what went wrong, what did I do, you know, maybe if I'd cooked more gourmet dinners.
Yeah.
Yeah, they feel real personal, like it's a personal failure. I mean, that they did something wrong, that they didn't make this work. Even if they did have times when they saw it coming or they had problems or they thought of it themselves, it's still a feeling of failure. Nobody really likes it. I've heard it described like having your arm cut off.
Yeah.
Such a loss.
And this idea, particularly if we're very competent people, it's sort of, gee, I'm so competent in other areas of my life. You know, I run my business well, and, you know, other people love me, and yet I can't seem to make this marriage continue. Yeah.
It's important. It's important to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
And to recognize that you're human and we all make mistakes.
And that there's 2 people involved. So as much as I might want to stay in a relationship, if you don't, I really am powerless. You know, I can be the most fabulous woman in the universe, but, you know, if he doesn't think so, that's the way it is. And that part of detaching from maybe that other person's reality and their right to choose. Because I know that's part of that disbelief, which is, oh, how dare they? You know, how could they make this kind of decision? And that they really can. They really can. How about this idea of focusing on the real issues? What do you think that means?
The real issues, you probably shouldn't fight over who gets the bicycle.
Okay.
It's more important to be dealing with issues about custody of the children and the care of the children.
Okay.
You know, and the needs of everybody all concerned.
Okay. So maybe the fact that we've been fighting and delaying the divorce for at least 3 years over who's going to pay the monthly storage space rental fee is probably not really what's happening.
Exactly, and it's a good idea if people can look at it not in terms of what they think is fair, but what in terms of what is needed by all concerned.
Okay.
And, you know, who is this person representing to them? How is this a reenactment of their early life? Is this person like their mother or their father? And the disruptions that happened with the mother or father, is that being projected onto this person now?
Okay. Ah, okay, speaking of projection, that's just fine. How about setting priorities? How about that? That idea of, you know, you're saying look at the real issues. How do we decide what's important? What we need to do next? I mean, I know for me, it was a lot of times I made those decisions based on my own anxiety level, you know, which may not have always been accurate, but it was the sense of, you know, I have to take care of this, when really it could have waited. And it's maybe nice to be able to run that past another person and get some support.
Well, I think one thing is deciding what's necessary to build your future and to be self-sufficient. Do you need more education? You know, do you need to get a job?
Okay.
And can you keep the lines of communication going with your ex? You know, can you still get along civilly? Can you be friends? You know, is that possible? And some can, some don't. You know, some are unwilling. but the more that they can, especially if they're parents, the better for the kids.
Well, and it's like that couple we saw after the break. You know, well, we're just fine. We've made this agreement. That's so California in the sense that, you know, why don't you come over for wine on Saturday with my new boyfriend? What do you think realistically about that? I mean, how realistic is it for us to remain friends and after we have separated or divorced? What's your experience with that?
It's probably not a good idea to try to be, it's important to try to be civil and to remain civil, but to try to maintain a friendship immediately is probably not a good idea, because it's very important to get closure of the relationship in order to begin the uncoupling process. And that's why you sometimes see anger come into play. It's a way of getting some distance from the partner.
Okay. In fact, for some of us, being angry may be the only way we can separate.
Absolutely.
You know, that if we were going to try to separate, you know, friendly, that particularly if I don't want the divorce and you're being friendly to me, it's very easy, I would guess, for me to assume that maybe that means more than it actually does.
You may be getting a mixed message.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It may encourage a false hope.
Okay. So it sounds like clarity is going to be key.
Clarity is extremely important, and that's also very important in presenting the divorce to children, because children very much want their parents to get back together again. So once the decision is made, the partners have to be quite firm about it.
Okay. So when the children come to visit, saying things like, well, you know, this is Mommy's idea, and I didn't want to leave, but this was her choice, and she's ruined our lives. I mean, those are kind of things we need to avoid.
That's not a good idea.
Okay.
It's best to present it as a decision by both partners,
Okay.
and without blaming the other partner for what went wrong.
Okay. Because it's a hard time, I would imagine, particularly during this time of year. You know, if you had children and you're trying to make sure their holidays are at least, you know, as close to normal as possible. At the same time, you're grieving, and they wish their mom or dad were there. I mean, it must be a very difficult conversation to have. Then the whole idea of who's going to go to whose house for which holiday, and it just, I think it can be very complicated.
And it can be really sad for the kids if they're used, you know, and pulled and pushed in between,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, that does happen, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's very important to not make your children a pawn in what's going on.
Okay. Or our friends or our family members. Or, you know, basically, the idea of taking a responsibility and doing that emotional, what's called emotional moratorium that you referred to before, that idea of going back through and saying, what happened? What was my part? What can I do differently next time?
And that's part of the honesty part of it.
Yes, it is.
Evaluate.
We're gonna, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We do need to close. All right, I know you have lots to say. I know I do too. But I want to thank you both for joining us this evening. I want to thank you for being with us. In the upcoming weeks, we'll look at fatherhood and men and eating disorders. Happy holidays from all of us at Bay Area Psychology. Good night.